Hello and welcome to this CodeRage session. I'm Girish Patil from Gnostice. In this session, we'll explore and find solutions to some old Delphi programming problems. Perhaps after learning about these solutions, we'll most likely put them into use with every Delphi application that we build. Here's our plan. We'll be looking at a few problems only today, but we will try and go as deep as we can to understand the solutions or the problems and their solutions. The problems are these. We'll look at a possible better way to manage a list of objects, and then this old problem of being able to receive mouse wheel messages at the control the mouse is over without having to focus the control, and then a design time tool to arrange controls on a form without having to calculate the left and top positions and add the widths and heights and so on. And finally, some pointers as to how you could take this further and develop more sophisticated solutions, followed by general information and Q&A. Before we get started, here's some notes on the method of learning that we will adopt and some background information about how this talk came about. So first we will experience the problem firsthand, understand it through some applications that show the problem, and then we will look at the solutions, the code for them, and learn from it. And finally, we will experience the solutions themselves. I'm sure most people can relate to the Delphi programming problems that we have just listed in the previous slide. And anybody who has built sophisticated real-world applications has come across these. And recently, while developing some of our products, well, not so recently, but a few months ago, we had to face the same problems that were always there while we have been programming in Delphi since its first versions. And this time, we decided to solve them for good. And we did solve them, and here I am sharing those solutions with you. So with that, I think it's time to dive into the demos. So the first one was about a possible better way to manage a list of objects. So we declare a variable of TList type, we declare a variable of our object type, and then instantiate our TList object, and then the object that we want to store into the TList. Then we would perhaps add the object into the list and maybe even set properties before we do that. And finally, when we have put the objects into the list, we would go about accessing them by doing something like this. So depending on the type of the object, we would cast the reference to that type and then access the properties of that object. We won't, of course, do all of this in one go, but generally we would program all these steps into our applications. So finally, once we are done with those objects, we would like to free each of the objects by going through getting them out of the list and then finally free the list itself. So the question that we are asking here is, can we avoid the need to cast this reference every time that we access the object through the list? And also, can we avoid the need to free it explicitly by going through the whole list? It appears there is an answer to this, and the VCL's T object list and T component list provide similar functionality for T objects and T components. But let's see how we can have this for our own classes. So let's open our first demo, this one right here, and I have the main form open. Let me go into the code, and first let's look at the normal way or the usual way of doing this. Okay, let me just execute this program so we know what it does. It basically creates a list of shapes, draws them onto a paint box, and clears them off. So both these buttons do the same thing but in their own ways. Okay, so what does the ordinary way do? So there's some user interface code in this. Then we create the shapes this way. So first of all, we create the list, and then we loop through all the shape types and then add a shape object to each of those, for each of those shape types. And we do that by instantiating a tMyShape object, which is our own type, and call the add method on the list. And then we draw those shapes onto the paint box and draw them again to clear them off. So in this code is where we can see the need to cast all the time. I could have used a with statement here, but we want to highlight this part, so I've left it as it is. And then finally, once we're done with whatever we wanted to do, we go through the list and then free the objects in that list. Again, the need to typecast. In the new way, or the possible better way, we still create those objects, those shape objects, but this, okay, let me just show you one more thing here. So these are our list, the variables for our lists. So the first ordinary way and then the new way. So the new way is of a different type, which is a new list type that we have implemented, and the other one is of plist. Okay, so this, we have implemented a new method in our new type to add shapes, so that we don't have to create the object here and set all the properties into it. Okay, so now let's go see what happens in here. As you can see, there's no local function. In this case, the cleaner way, we have delegated that to our list object, which does all this stuff. So basically the questions we were asking was to avoid casting and the need to free the objects explicitly from the list. So let's look at this new list type that we have. So it's derived from the plist type, and the important part to avoiding the casting is here. So we redeclare the items property and redeclare it this time as our new type, and then we also implement a property getter, basically again that which returns our new type. So let's just go see what happens in this property getter. And that's where you'll find the typecast, the only place that you will need to apply this cast now on the items property. And then about free, we'll step into the VCL code for a second here, into the plist code itself, and see what happens when a list is freed. So let's just go into the destructor of the plist. Plist destructor calls clear, which calls set count, which calls delete on each of the items contained in the list, which in turn calls the notify method, again passing the reference to the item. And notify is a virtual method that we can override, and that's what we have done here in our new list class. So we override the notify method, check if the action was delete, and then finally free our object. So this way, just by calling free on our list type, it automatically frees all the objects in the list. I guess that's about it for this particular tip. Now let's move on to some really interesting stuff that I feel a lot of people are waiting for. Okay, this was about getting the mouse wheel to work the way we want it to work. So first we will look at the problem by running this application. So I placed a few controls here, a scroll box, two scroll boxes, and then a grid control and an edit control. Now if I roll the wheel over any of these controls, they don't handle the wheel message, or probably the wheel message doesn't go to them. That's why they don't have anything to do. But if I focus the grid and then roll the wheel, then there is some activity. Likewise for the scroll box, when I focus it, I can use the wheel to scroll, and the scroll still works. Even if I take the mouse out of the control, the wheel still scrolls the scroll box. Now, most Windows applications that we get to see don't behave this way. The scroll wheel normally works on the control that the mouse is over. So, and a practical problem, if we want to better understand this. Now let's say we have a form where we are editing some stuff, and then we have another view of a document which we need to refer to and type into the form. So if we have to type and at the same time scroll and look at the contents of that document, then we can't do it. We have to get the focus back to this document view, and then scroll, and then go back here, and then we can start typing again. Now this is not the ideal behavior that we want, and in fact the best example of the correct behavior can be seen right here in the IDE, in the Delphi IDE. Now let's say I have my focus here in the code editor, and if you see, I can operate my scroll wheel on any of the other windows and it will work on the window that the mouse is over. So how do we get this kind of behavior for our application? So this is the application where we have fixed this problem. Let's go see first the code that did the fix and then finally see it working. Okay, first of all, there are three ways that I can think of for solving this. One is to override the window procedure of the form and handle the WM mouse wheel message and then pass it on to the control the mouse is over, basically by calling the do mouse wheel method of that control. The other way is to listen to the application's on message event and do this similar stuff. The method I've used here is to register a mouse hook. So this is how we do that. And it all starts off in the form create event. So we use the Windows API function to register our mouse hook, saying that we want to register the hook for the mouse messages, passing our hook procedure, and then depending on whether we want to monitor global mouse events or just stick to our instance and our thread, we specify these parameters. And while we are here, we unregister the mouse hook this way. So let's go see what happens in the mouse hook. So once we register this hook, Windows will call our procedure every time there is a mouse event. And according to the reference, here's some basic implementation. So we're going to process it only if the code parameter is greater than equal to 0, and also check if the message is WM mouse wheel. The rest of it, we're just going to pass it on to the chain of hooks that have been already registered. So let's see what happens here. The code is actually really simple, but there are some things we need to watch out for, and that's where some time might have been lost if people have tried this before. So once we know that it's a WM mouse wheel message, we access the message structure, get the point from the message structure, and then we use the VCL find VCL window function, passing the point and getting the control under the mouse cursor. And if we did find a control, we get the wheel delta from the message structure, and then finally call the do mouse wheel method on that control, using the old trick of getting to the protected methods by declaring a new class of the twin control. Okay, so there's one important point here that people may miss out. That is to assume that the wheel delta is always going to be within the -120 plus 120 range. That is actually the value for one roll of the wheel or one click. But the accumulated delta can be much greater than that, and if you cast this the mouse data variable to a shortened, we will lose out the real delta, and that's when the mouse wheel starts to behave, or the scroll starts to be really. So we have taken care of that here. So once we know that our control has processed the mouse wheel or has handled the mouse wheel method, we clear the event by setting result to a non-zero value and exit out of this procedure. So the important point to note here is to make sure that our control handles the do mouse wheel method. And in our case, the grid already handles it, and the scroll box, when there is a mouse wheel message, it generates an event called the on mouse wheel event, which we are handling here in the application. So we just need to make sure that one of the do mouse wheel methods have been overridden and handled. Now I think it's time to run this application and see it working well for us. Now let's see this. So my focus is here on the scroll box on the right. Now I will move the wheel or mouse over to the scroll box on the left and roll the wheel. As you can see, it's working very nicely for us here over the grid also. Now if I focus the edit control and start typing in it, I can still roll my mouse wheel over any of the controls and still work fine. Okay, so the next one is our tool to arrange controls on a form. Let's open up, this one. Let's reuse this particular application. Now let's say, okay, let me just choose the edit control and place a few edit boxes. Normally, we would like to arrange them in a particular way, in a consistent way. So what we want to ideally have is a tool which we can just bring up, select the controls and say, okay, place them apart 4 or 8 pixels apart and be done with it. So we can actually develop this tool for ourselves, and let's see how we can do that. Some fundamentals we need to understand before we can go about developing this tool. Okay, so the Delphi IDE provides us a set of API known as the Open Tools API, and this is the set of API that we can use to extend the Delphi IDE. Okay, so let's see if we can get a quick introduction to this Open Tools API and then go and develop this new add-in which will help us arrange controls on a form. Okay, just to give an analogy, the Open Tools API is to the Delphi IDE what the Windows API is to Windows application programming. So this Open Tools API is a set of interfaces that interact and control different elements of the IDE. These are basically interfaces of two kinds. One is of the type that we need to implement, that is the Tools API programmers, and the other is the IDE implements which we can make use of to do certain things with the IDE. So an example of the first kind is, let's say we want to be notified when a file is opened in the IDE, or let's say the compilation begins or something like that. Some event takes place in the IDE and we want to be notified. So then we would need to implement the appropriate notifier interface and register an instance of our class, and then from there on the IDE will take care of calling the appropriate methods on our object so that we can do whatever we wanted to do when that event took place in the IDE. Let's just have a look at this notifier interface declaration in the Tools API unit. Okay, I think that was the IDE notifier. So as you can see here, there are lots of interfaces, and the interface that we were just looking at was the IDE notifier, which has the file notification method, which we need to implement, and then the IDE will take care of calling it when there is an IDE event taking place. Okay, there's another kind of interfaces that are known as service interfaces, or just services. And these are the ones we are actually interested in at this point. So these service interfaces are interfaces that the IDE internally implements. And we can call on these services to get things done in the IDE. For example, if we want to add a menu item to the main menu, we would use one of the service interfaces. Or let's say if we wanted to access the elements or the controls on a form, we would use one of the service interfaces. So there's one important, really important point to getting access to the service interfaces, and that is this. So the Tools API declares a global variable that the IDE initializes internally when it starts up, which actually gives us access to all the service interfaces that the IDE exposes, which we can in turn use to do things with the IDE. It would be a good idea to open up the Tools API unit and read the comments in there. That would give us quite a bit of information. So what we will do actually is just step into or rather go through the steps of creating our new tool, and that way we can probably understand all of this better. Okay, so here are the steps. So first of all, we need to create a new package, which we have done here. So you would do that by any of several methods, by file new package, or just dragging and dropping a package from the tool palette. Then set some properties on it, give it a name, and also go into the options for the package and make sure the usage option is set to design time only. Give it a nice name as well, and then the important step is to add a reference to the design IDE package, and only then we would get access to a useful Borland IDE services variable to call upon to get our work done. So this is the all-important step, and we do this simply by adding reference to it. So then once we access this variable, we will be able to call on the appropriate methods on the interfaces. Okay, once we have done that, we save the package, and then we do the stuff that we need to do that is specific to our tool. So first, what we want to do is add a menu item to invoke this new controls arranger dialog. And let's go see how we can do that. Okay, so all the work starts off at the register procedure. Now, the important thing to note here is that the register procedure is called every time the IDE loads a package. So if you have a register method in one of the units that contains that is contained in a package, then the register method will be called every time that package loads, or the IDE loads that package. And here what we're doing is instantiating an object of our class which will take care of doing some work for us. And also, when the package unloads, we call the free method on the object that we just created. So let's go see what this particular class does. Into the constructor of this class. So what we wanted to achieve was to add a new menu item into the edit menu of the IDE. And this is how we're doing it. So we simply create a new menu item. We set the caption property, and then we set the on-click event handler of that menu item, and finally we add we get hold of the main menu of the IDE through the Borland IDE services global variable, and then we access the second item of the main menu, which is the edit menu, and finally add our new menu item to that particular drop-down menu. So let's go see how it's actually working. Now, right now, since I have uninstalled this package, nothing is showing up here. Let me install it. Build and install. Okay, so that's the confirmation. And if we go see our edit menu now, we have magically got this new menu item with a caption arrange. Then let's go see what we have done in the on-click event handler of this particular menu item. Okay, there are a couple of things we need to do here. First of all, we need to make sure if it makes sense to bring up the dialog to arrange those controls, because if we're not designing a form, or if the form editor is not open right now, it doesn't make sense to bring up the dialog. So we're carrying out some checks right here in this particular function. Again, accessing the Borland IDE services, we can get the current module. And if we got a valid current module, then we check if we get the editor that is current, and finally we check if the editor is a form editor, or it supports the form editor interface. And this is again a VCL function actually to check if a particular interface supports a particular interface, and then it will return the new interface that we were looking for in the result property, or if it didn't find it. If the interface doesn't implement the interface that we are looking for, it will simply return nil. The result property, the result variable is assigned, and we get back our editor, our form editor, if there is one showing right now. So we just make sure that there is a valid form editor available. If it is, we call on the get cell count, or this is basically a method to get the count of the selected components on a form. So it doesn't make sense to arrange controls if there's less than 2 selected. So we make that check here and display an appropriate message. And if we've got enough controls to arrange, then we go further and create our form or dialog that will actually do all the arranging work for us. And this dialog, we show it to the user. The user needs to do some selection, and finally when the OK button is clicked, we come back and do some stuff, and finally we free the dialog. Okay, let's see it running up to this point. So if we click this arrange menu item now, since I'm in the code editor, the dialog should not come up. So you see nothing happening. And now if we go over to, okay, let's just place these edit boxes all over the place so that we can see this new tool working for us. Okay, let me invoke the arrange tool now. Okay, there's no control selected, the less than 2, so let's select all of them at once and then invoke arrange. Now we can see our arrange dialog popping up. Okay, now let's say we want to just arrange them 4 pixels apart, all in one line in the horizontal plane, and I just want all their tops to be aligned as well. Okay, let's see how this works. Hey, that really works. Now let's see if we can change that order to a vertical arrangement, all their left sides, and place them 4 pixels apart in the vertical plane. Okay, that works too. Now let's see how this code managed all that. The code for arranging the controls is right here in the OK button click event handler. We get hold of the form editor interface first, make sure it's a valid one. Then we check if the user requested for horizontal alignment or alignment along the horizontal plane. And based on that, we have some constants defined that actually tell us the property names that we need to set based on the type of alignment that we need to do. So if horizontal alignment was requested, we will only change the left property, and to calculate the position or the left property, we will actually be using the left property and the width property as required. Okay, so first we start off with the control that is first in the list of selected controls. We get hold of it, get the property value by name, then we check if the user requested for the alignment to be from the near point or the far point. So if alignment along the horizontal plane is requested, and the near point for horizontal alignment would be left of the previous control, and if it's right, it would be the far point. So that's what this particular parameter, rather this one, decides. So if that was requested, then we need to add the width of the control, otherwise we leave it out, and then the actual offset between the controls that was requested, and also if the direction was in the reverse, then we have a negative offset, and finally the position is advanced by offset pixels. So this way we loop through all the controls, the selected controls, starting from the second selected control and change their positions based on the properties that the user set. So the same single method or the single procedure is used for horizontal and vertical alignment. Now let's go back and just one last time let's play with this new toy that we have. Okay, let's pick up some more edit boxes. Just place them, it doesn't matter now where we place them. Now let's see, I'm going to try and make some interesting shapes with this. Edit, arrange, then okay, I'm just going to try and make kind of a staircase. So position from right, flow will be left to right, and then top to bottom is fine. Along the horizontal plane I want it to be much further apart, and along the vertical I actually want a bit more. Okay, let's see what this does for us. Also, yeah, we want to offset from the left of the control and not the right, because we want to build a staircase which is cascading. There you go. Now let's say we want to turn all of these inward. So we go here, arrange, and then this time the horizontal flow will be right to left because I want to turn it in this way, and taking the positions from the right side because anyway the flow is in the reverse direction, and I think I set about 21 pixels. Let's see. Hey, not bad. This really works. We are done with our demos for this session. Let's go back and see what else we have. Just a few more inputs. We could convert the example of the mouse wheel code into a component so that we can just drop it on our main form of our new application. And then we could enhance the controls arranger. We could actually take it to a really high level where it would keep all the labels and edit boxes together while still doing the arrangement for us. And for help on the Tools API, these are the possible references or sources you can go to, or rather some of the good ones. The Tools API pass file itself, then the Delphi help file, the G-Expert site has some good FAQs, and of course articles on the developer network. So you can get the code for all of this, all of what you saw at http://www.Gnostice.com/coderage.asp. Feel free to use this code in a commercial environment to develop commercial applications, but please don't sell it as is or make it a foundation for a new commercial product of a similar nature. And please point people to the URL that I just gave out rather than you giving them the code, so that they can get hold of the latest code if there have been any updates. And you can contact me at the following email, and the company website is www.Gnostice.com. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this and hope it was useful. Bye.